start immediately. Welcome to all of you. I'm really glad to see that so many signatories and representatives of the institutions have joined our parliamentary delegations in this debate that follows the launch of the call for action in December in the margins of the ministerial meeting in Tirana. And without further ado, I would like to start by giving the floor to the President of the Parliamentary Assembly, Lord Vowles. Please, Lord Vowles, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Zanier. May I welcome all the participants, old friends and new friends. And it's a great pleasure to see you all here to discuss this important matter. I want to make a special thank you to Secretary General Helga Schmidt, who's going to be with us today. And we've already met at the Permanent Council and yesterday's meeting of our Bureau. So this kind of close contact is something which we very much welcome. Can I also just take the opportunity of welcoming the other executive heads of the OSCE institutions who are with us today. Matteo Macechi of ODIHR, Maria Teresa Gonzalez Ribeiro from Freedom of the Media, and Abdrakhmanov, who is the representative for special regarding national minorities. So it's great welcome to you all, and I hope to be able to welcome all executive heads at some time in our meeting, Bureau or Standing Committee meetings. The background to this afternoon's meeting, I think you're probably all aware. The call for action was launched by my predecessor, President Tsereteli, to whom we record our thanks again for all his work. And he launched this initiative in December during the OSCE Ministerial Council and pointed out that the OSCE was going through various challenges and put forward the view that parliamentarians have some distinct assets which can be of help. Now, the intention of this meeting is to follow up on the publication of that document, which I'd like to emphasize has been endorsed by the whole of the current Bureau. This was done actually yesterday afternoon. So in addition to the distinguished signatories, you have jointly, severally and corporately the signatories of all the Bureau members of the present Assembly. Now, we're going to follow up on the publication of this document this afternoon, put it in the perspective of the Parliamentary Assembly's possible contribution to the Helsinki +50 process. And this should flow from the vision of the Charter of Paris. We celebrated the 30th anniversary just two months ago. And we need to invest in that Paris spirit and use it for the future. I acknowledge, as I think most, if not all my colleagues do, that whilst many of the challenges OSCE faces depend on the much wider crisis of multilateralism and international organizations that are all suffering to some extent. So other aspects are peculiar to the OSCE, and we want to address those as a Parliamentary Assembly. We note and believe that the organization can bring added value for the benefit of citizens. We also believe that it's not really acknowledged sufficiently in many capitals of our participating states. And one of our objectives must be to raise the profile of OSCE with our sometimes apparently reluctant member governments. We realize that we have got a particular political role to play in helping generate that interest and the political thrust which we can make in our national parliaments and with our national governments. Now, Ambassador Zanier, I will take up no more of your time. I may, if you permit, but let me make a contribution at the end of each section and this afternoon's webinar, if it's necessary. I promise you all I shan't say anything if it's not necessary. But otherwise, I shall be here listening to the contributions that you all make. And I look forward to this afternoon's debate and see how the various delegations to our Assembly can be used to take forward the objectives which we all have of ensuring that OSCE for the future has a right place in everybody's consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And now the floor to the Secretary General, Roberto Montella. Please, Roberto.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador Zanier, dear Lamberto, Mr. President, dear friends. I don't think it has ever happened in the history of the OSCE that we have all gathered in one room, though a virtual room, such a parterre de roi, I would say. A parterre de roi, which basically includes all those who have served the organization since its beginning at the highest level. We have chairmen in office, chairpersons in office of the past. We have former OSCE presidents. We have former OSCE and OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Secretary Generals, heads of institutions. This is a unicum, I would say, and it's a great opportunity. Of course, I will avoid recognizing each individually, otherwise we would need a half an hour only for the presentations. But the idea came up in the summer last year when we didn't manage to renew the heads of institutions. And we kind of ended in some do not like to call it a crisis of the organization, but somehow we could agree to call it a challenge for the organization. And so I thought, what can the Parliamentary Assembly do in order to strengthen this organization? In the past, there have been many ideas on how to make this organization more efficient. There was the panel of eminent persons. Many of you have been involved in these, the Corfu process or the fit for purpose agenda of the last Secretary General, the structured dialogue, Helsinki plus 40, and so on and so forth. There are many ideas out there on how to make this organization much stronger. But I have served the organization, and some of you were my bosses in the past, so from a field operation, from a field perspective, and I've seen the organization at its best, and I've seen the end users of the organization, those who really benefit from the work of this organization. And as I can speak for many of you, because you've served the organization for many years, I think here in this virtual room, we have those who really like this organization. I would say those who love this organization, those who have given a lot of time and a lot of energy to this organization. So we all want to see this organization more efficient, and we want to see the great work that this organization does also recognized by, and I would say by not only the great media. Very often we talk about the visibility of the organization. I think our challenge here is not to make this organization visible in the big networks. I think it's to make it more acknowledged at the leadership in the ministries of foreign affairs, in the political leadership of each of the 57 participating states. You know, the challenge that we have with the organization with the budget. So if there is political attention to this organization, also the budget should be passed on time, considering also the little resources given to this organization. So when we thought of this challenge that is going through in the organization, the contribution of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly could be one of putting more attention at the political level of this organization. President Serratelli, who launched the idea, said to me, why don't we engage one of the civil servants of this organization who has served it for the longest time, Ambassador Zanier, who was twice Secretary General, Director of the Conflict Prevention Center, the latest High Commissioner for National Minorities, who knows the organization in and out. And Ambassador Zanier has kindly accepted this offer from the Parliamentary Assembly to kind of help us put together all these ideas that are out there, to connect to all these leaders that are out there, and really put together many ideas on how we can relaunch the organization, how to make it more efficient. I know today you will touch upon some issues like the consensus rule or ICANN dialogue can be improved. I know there are big questions there, and I think we will not manage to talk about all the issues in one session. But I think the project is in good hands. Ambassador Zanier will help us through this session, but also in a series of events that would lead to what I would call the Helsinki plus 50 project. So my idea is to really launch with this event today a series of meetings, seminars, but also demarches to some participating states, really to see where the challenges of the organization are, and what can be the contribution of the Parliamentary Assembly, but also of those who have served the organization in the past in order to make this organization stronger and more efficient. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'm looking forward to the debate, and thank you very much to all of you for participating. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Secretary General. Thank you, dear Roberto. And thank you, of course, Mr. President. From my side, I would like to also add a couple of comments to set the scene for our work today. And I would like to do so with a bit of a historical perspective. I would like to go back to 1994, the Budapest Summit, which transformed the CSC into a full-fledged organization. And some of the problems we face today go back already to that time. First, we're talking profile, and at that time we had a change of name. But the cloud the CSC had built over the years went through that change of name largely lost. And even today, the OSCE can be hardly compared in terms of its own profile with the profile that the CSC had. I can tell you that when I was appointed Secretary General, the announcement on the Italian media is that an Italian had been appointed Secretary General of the OECD. So they got the organization wrong, even the public media. So this is a fact of life, but something we need to consider when working on the profile of the organization. But in addition to that, there was no firm foundation for the new organization. There was no charter, no legal personality. There was not even an agreement to call the countries members of the organization. They still are participating states. So which shows that the organization is still halfway between a conference, as it was before with the CSC, and an organization as it aspires to be. The subsequent development of the OSCE took place is not in a strategic manner, but on the basis of a very large number of decisions by the participating states, all consensual decisions, of course, but not always coherent, not always even compatible with each other, just superposed one to the others over the years. And at some point, there was a realization that reordering, reforming, streamlining were needed, and there were efforts in this direction. The Secretary General just mentioned it a few minutes ago. There was a group, a panel of eminent persons in 2005 issued a very relevant recommendation. It's interesting reading. Many of those are still valid today. There was the Corfu process at the time of the Greek chairmanship. The Swiss chairmanship tried again in 2014, but they didn't even manage to have a permanent council decision to start a panel or to base on it the new panel of eminent people. They still did it on their own behalf as the chairmanship. And there is a very interesting report as a result of it. But in this report, you will see that the Russian representative issued separate conclusions. So even the experts at that point were showing in their deliberations the divisions and the geopolitical impact on the organization. The Parliamentary Assembly itself issued periodically recommendations on increasing the effectiveness of the organization. But those recommendations were also systematically disregarded. So this is where we are now. You, the fathers of the organization, have taken the lead in issuing this, inspired by the leadership of the Assembly, to issue this call for action. The parliamentary delegations are the ones who should now decide through this process, and this is the first meeting of a working group, where we will focus mainly on the agenda and the priorities of this process. And the idea is to see how can we use Parliament to try and push these initiatives to make the organization stronger, to make it more effective, to make it more capable of delivering, but also to ensure that there is a better visibility, a better understanding, and also that the organization is more used, because obviously it covers a space that is very interesting and very important in this space. So it's investing on multilateralism by investing in the OSCE in a way that is inclusive, that keeps everybody on board. but also in a way that the OSCE presents itself upfront as an option, as a tool for countries to pursue their policies in a cooperative manner, involving everybody in the region. So this is a bit what we are planning to do. We have a time frame that can be extended up to 2025. We will have the 50th anniversary. That will be half a century from the Helsinki Final Act. So at that point, it will be, I think, natural to look at the OSCE and see how, half a century later, what do we need to address the current issues, and is the tool that we have efficient enough? So we will have two introductory speakers. We have two sessions, about 1 hour each, after which I will open the floor for a debate. I would hope that we get not so much statements, but comments. And I would encourage you to be interactive and to comment on other people's comments. If and when you want to intervene, use the chat function. Just flag your interest, your request of intervening, and there will be a speakers list that will be periodically updated by my colleagues. If you just wave, I don't see everybody, so it's better if you write it down in the chat. And please try to speak for no more than 3 minutes, so that as many people as possible can have an opportunity to intervene. With this, let me now give the floor to the first of our two guest speakers, Douglas Wake. Doug is serving now as a senior advisor in the office of the Secretary General, but he knows and he has seen the CSC and the OSCE from many different perspectives. He was a member of delegation. He was the deputy head of a field operation in Southeast Europe. He was first deputy director of the ODIHR in Warsaw. So he has the profile of the institution, the one of the delegation, the one of the field operation, and now the secretariat. So Doug, you are perfectly well placed to give us an assessment of the state of affairs in the OSCE and your advice on what parliamentarians can do to help. Please, Doug. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Zanier, Lamberto. President Lord Vaunus, Secretary General Montella, dear Roberto, distinguished members of the Assembly and colleagues and guests. You know, it really is an honor for me to be introducing your discussion about ways to support the OSCE as it approaches its 50th birthday. I say introducing, but the previous speakers, including the President, the Secretary General, and you, Lamberto, have already laid out many of the issues. I'll try to organize my remarks around 3 themes that are touched upon in the call for action and the paper that you prepared for this meeting: raising the OSCE's profile, some key challenges facing the organization, and some opportunities to strengthen the organization. You know, making our organization more visible, better known, has really long been a key goal, and others have already pointed that out. What I can say is that our new Secretary General, Helge Schmidt, is truly committed to it, and the Secretariat will certainly very much support this endeavor. But I think it's clear that communication strategies are not effective unless there's a good story to tell. And of course, it's easy to focus on what may appear to be a crisis, as many did over the course of the period when the 4 top posts were vacant. But I think it's important also to focus on the bigger picture and to take a step back and look at what we've done over the past 45 years to build up this organization. For those who may not be as familiar as former chairs in office who I see, and former heads of institution, you know, it's maybe important to step back and say that this is 57 very different states who are able to come together for dialogue and action on an amazingly wide range of issues based on agreed principles and commitments. And the chair, the field operations, the institutions, the secretariat, the Parliamentary Assembly, they're delivering practical results, practical work every day in areas, just for example, like promoting gender equality, monitoring ceasefires, supporting conflict mediation, offering recommendations to better implement commitments on democracy and human rights, countering trafficking in human beings, preventing terrorism. These are flagship activities, just a few of which I've named, and many of which the Parliamentary Assembly has been a pioneer in promoting. And they continue despite COVID-19, while we're taking great care to protect our staff and to address the security implications of the pandemic. The work goes on. And it goes on, I think it's important to say, in a very cost-effective way. Maybe that's not appropriate for me coming from the Secretariat, but I think if one looks at what the OSCE does, the citizens of our participating states are getting quite good value for the sense that they're providing. I say not dollars, not euros, but just a few cents for every taxpayer in the OSCE area that goes to this organization. And most recently, the Tirana Virtual Ministerial Council was able to adopt decisions across all three dimensions on quite timely topics like transnational organized crime, preventing corruption through digitalization, eradicating torture. So my point on this visibility issue is that there's both a long-running record of performance and there's a recent good news story that the parliamentarians, the people in this virtual room can help to make better known. And particularly for parliamentarians, it's not just the public outreach, but the outreach to your own governments, to senior officials. Now, if I turn to challenges facing the organization, preventing it from playing an even more positive role, we need to be frank about the overall political environment. I have in mind the extreme polarization, the lack of genuine dialogue, the mistrust that we see really every week in the political discussions at the Permanent Council. And what underlies this? Among the underlying really critical challenges to be diplomatic are the uneven implementation of commitments, to put it quite mildly, the limited progress in resolving crises and conflicts, and a near absence of debate about how to overcome these shortcomings. There's even lack of agreement on what the core business of the OSCE really is. So addressing these issues, and this was alluded to, I think, by the president, depend on bigger issues than bigger things than just the OSCE, the political will of participating states. But there are other challenges that are operational, internal to the OSCE. For example, we have a very cumbersome budget process, never-ending cycle, leading to 12-month budgets, each one very similar to the previous one, and typically adopted several months late. We spend enormous amount of time on discussing agendas and participation in meetings, more so than we actually spend in the meetings themselves. And we operate, of course, in a quite crowded playing field. There are a lot of international organizations out there, and it may seem sometimes that we're competing rather than complementing each other. Many would also say we really have an overly ambitious programmatic portfolio. This is something that's been pointed out in the call for action. Trying to do an awful lot with very limited resources. So what are the opportunities then to strengthen the organization in the run-up to 2025 and beyond? It's certainly not my role to outline the process that you're going to see or the desired outcome. I would really stress here, this is up to the participating states. But there are two overall challenges, or rather, overall changes that would really benefit, I think, the OSCE. And the first obvious one is that every participating state could do more to implement its OSCE commitments. And I say every participating state, stressing that there are no perfect records of performance. Every state has shortcomings. And while this is principally a responsibility of governments, speaking here also with parliamentarians, of course, there is a role for national parliaments to press their governments to improve the implementation of commitments. The second overall thing that would make life better in the OSCE would be for all participating states to engage more in really constructive, productive dialogue, not only in the formal sessions, but in informal settings where it may be more conducive to reaching some solutions. Beyond these couple of overarching issues, there have already been references from all of the previous speakers to the major efforts that have been undertaken over the years to identify ways to make the organization stronger, more effective, and so on. There were also several events last year to mark the 30th anniversary of the Paris Charter, where there were excellent suggestions put forward for the future. And what I would say, to echo exactly what the Secretary General said at the beginning, is there's no shortage of ideas. The real question is which, if any, may garner consensus. And I'll just throw out a few questions before I conclude. And this is not an exhaustive list. Could the OSCE be more active on political military issues? Could we do more on the environment and economic issues? What could we do to get more out of the conflict cycle toolbox? Translate early warning into early action? What steps could we take to make sure that women really are meaningfully involved in all phases of the conflict resolution and peace processes? Internally, what could we do maybe to streamline the budget and agenda setting processes, or to focus our programmatic work exactly where the OSCE has the most added value? How do we make sure that we're keeping up with the nexus of technology and security? And the last point I would make is a cautionary note. How do we make sure, how do participating states make sure that any steps they take to improve the organization are carefully crafted to ensure that they avoid undermining the principles and commitments on which they've already agreed, or the existing structures that are already doing so much good work? So ultimately, to me, these are the kinds of questions that governments have to grapple with the support of executive structures, as well as distinguished partners, first and foremost, most like the Parliamentary Assembly, but also including civil society, think tanks, academic institutions. I know my colleagues and I in the Secretariat will be very interested to hear what others have to say today and to follow your work over the coming months. I'm happy to be as helpful as possible in the process, and I thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you also for your very pragmatic approach and your suggestions that we have taken note of. We already have 9 requests for the floor, so would like, before beginning with Senator Cardin, just to remind everybody to try to stick to the 3 minutes limit so that as many people as possible can intervene in the debate. Senator Cardin, you have the floor.
Let me just unmute and I'll be right with you. First, thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. And let me say to Lord Bonas, thank you for stepping in. I see our friend on the line. So it's good to be with you all. I just want you to know, on behalf of the U.S. Helsinki Commission and our delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly, we strongly support your work, and we will continue to be very actively engaged. So thank you for stepping in, Lord Bonas. Let me just point out that my participation in the OSCE and formerly the CSCE goes back 30 years. So I am a true believer in the comprehensive definition of security, our candid exchanges, and our commitment to democratic governance, and the importance of civil societies. Political impasse that we experienced last year was not the fault of the organization itself. It was the fact that some of our states have not embraced the principles of the OSCE. Most recent example is the extraordinary measures taken against a single person, Alexei Navalny. It reminds me of Sergei Magnitsky and how that provoked all of our activities, first in the U.S. Helsinki Commission, then in the Parliamentary Assembly, then in our state capitals, and now globally with Global Magnitsky. We need to have the same passion to the commitments of the OSCE and motivate us to be even more engaged in how we can make the OSCE effective in dealing with our current challenges. The Parliamentary Assembly plays a critical role. We're not as restricted in consensus as they are in the Permanent Council. So we need, as parliamentarians, to be independent, and we also need to recognize that we have responsibilities that go beyond just attending our meetings, but to advocate on behalf of the implementation of what we do in the Parliamentary Assembly in our state capitals, and to also work with our missions in Vienna to make sure that we move forward on the principles of the OSCE. I strongly support more transparency, and I think we should follow up on our recommendations that the Permanent Council have live streaming. I think that could be a force for positive change. As all you know, the United States just experienced a threat to its democracy many thought unimaginable. Yet our democratic institutions held and our laws and constitutions have been upheld. I have never been so sure of the importance and necessity of our work to sustain and strengthen democracy and to protect and defend human rights. We have never abandoned our advocacy of human rights and fundamental freedoms through the OSCE region, but now we do so with greater vigor. We hope others develop the political will and determination to confront authoritarianism, nationalism, extremism, and aggression that threatens the security of all of us. Bottom line, we have an organization that structure is right. We need to confront those actors and states that are violating the principles and never deviate from the principles that we hold so dear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Next is the new representative of Freedom of the Media, Maria Teresa Gonçalves Ribeiro. Please, you have the floor, madam. We can't hear you. I can't see whether she's present, so I'll move to the next in the list.
Please.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, and I'm very sorry, but you know I had some technical problems, but finally I get connected with the meeting. So good evening, everyone. It's of course a pleasure to be with you all. And of course, I want to congratulate the Parliamentary Assembly for this outstanding event that it organized. I will try to be very brief. I would like to start by quoting one of the most brightest French writers that said, "The problem of our time is that the future is no longer what it has been." It's very interesting and very, very adapted to the challenging times we are living. And it's true that in these challenging times, this organization, with its unique membership, competences, and acting scope, should be increasingly relevant to play a role for a global engagement through cooperation. We need, of course, much more clarity on vision and on common purpose of the organization. That's for sure. If we want, that's really a need if we want to have political buy-in, and if you want to have the governments really committed to the work of OSCE. OSCE is a security organization based on the concept of comprehensive security, which is quite a unique one. And it's not a military or a human rights or an environmental organization. And this is what is decisive to define the OSCE. We need, of course, to aim for a genuine dialogue instead of simply exchanging positions. And for that, of course, I have pledged in the beginning of my campaign to this post to have this constructive dialogue with all the participating states on media freedom issues. I know that will not at all be easy, but I think it's the only way if you want to make progress and build instead of burn bridges. Now that a crisis is affecting the entire region, we need to show and communicate added value. And we need to approach new topics and challenges only if they are of relevance and connected to the very raison d'etre of this organization. More holistic and cross-dimensional approaches could help to capitalize more on this comparative strength. We should not duplicate work done by others, and I know this is sometimes difficult, but focus on the core business of OSCE. For example, I cannot compete in the freedom of the media and the freedom of expression. I will never be able to compete with UNESCO or the Council of Europe, but at the same time, I can do things that are unique to my mandate and cannot be done by others. And this is precisely what I intend to do. The OSCE has established unique mechanisms and mandates, and we should focus on these assets. Just to conclude, we need to involve much more the capitals, and in doing so, the parliamentarians can play a crucial role. They are close to the ministers, they are close to the government, and they really can push and can really create a positive dynamic towards our organization. Thank you very much for your attention.
Next speaker, Carrie Harrison. Please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, everybody? Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. And a happy new year to everyone. I hope you all are healthy and in this challenging time of the pandemic. First, I want to thank the thought-provoking non-paper and the initiative to put together a meeting with such a broad and interesting group. I'm happy that the Bureau of the OSCE has initiated a follow-up on this. And my focus as a parliamentarian and as a vice president in OSCE, the PA is my focus. In light of the worrying trends on polarization and alternative facts, just as you mentioned, Mr. Wake, I think it's necessary to seek common solutions through dialogue. Here, as we are parliamentarians in the OSCE PA, we have an important role to play to create trust. And we may have opportunities in our PA meetings to have more multilateral dialogues between delegations when the PA have meetings. I believe that as elected MPs who are accountable to our voters have a particular responsibility to strengthen multilateral diplomacy. In the OSCE PA, I think we need to strengthen the formal structures. We should use these formal structures, the delegations, the head of delegation, the bureau and the vice presidents, and not create new informal structures. In our respective countries, we have a responsibility to engage in dialogue on OSCE matters. We need to raise these matters in our own parliaments and with the responsible ministers. I have raised interpellations in my own parliament 2-3 times, and my experience is that this has resulted in fruitful debates and broader knowledge of the OSCE. Does the Secretariat have an overview of how active we as OSCE PA delegates are in our own countries? I think that could be wise to have to know more about the facts. What are we really doing and how are we performing in our own parliaments? And my commitment to the human dimension is strong, as I am also a member of the third committee in the Assembly. In general, I think that the human rights challenges have become worse during the pandemic. Today, on the Holocaust Day, I would like to mention that we need to find measures to counter anti-Semitism and similar trends in the OSCE PA region. I am very interested in hearing how we can, in practical political work, counter such ideological trends. The implementation reviews are mentioned in the non-paper. And to which degree are the implementation reviews followed up? I'm interested in hearing the participants' views on these matters, and maybe there also here is some figures or some experience we can have knowledge about. And achieving security for all by developing the gender focus of the organization in all aspects of our work is a key issue for me. And I have to say, I was a bit surprised that this issue is not covered in the background material. So I would very much wish that we have a debate on how the gender issue also can be helpful and important to promote OSCE solutions and the picture or the standing of the OSCE. And I look forward to hearing the suggestions here on how to increase the political attention to the OSCE. As a vice president in the OSCE PA, I look forward to take this further in the Bureau and the other formal organs of our delegations, such as the Standing Committee, because I think we all have some, we can make it better about our presentation in the public sphere to promote OSCE's values and the political work we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Margareta Sederfeld is next, please.
Thank you very much, Roberto Montella. Mr. President, honorables, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start with, I think that this project, the call for action is very important for today and for tomorrow. Just as Carrie Harrison, I am as well elected as Vice President of OSCE PA, and I am a member of the Swedish Parliament, a country who is head of sharing OSCE for this year. But I am not from the government. I am from the Parliament. And my perspective is as elected member of the parliament. And for me, OSCE PA is a very important body in the OSCE. And my perspective here is, of course, the parliamentarian perspective. As parliamentarian, I am elected by my voters, and so are all my colleagues in OSCE PA as well. And we can contribute with this perspective. I think that that's one of the most important issues. I would also like to mention that OSCE was founded during the Cold War, when it was a crisis. And we have crises today as well. Not one crisis. It's not only the COVID. It's several others. We are talking about, for example, a lack of respect. We are talking about a lack of democracy. We are talking about the war, the difference, the media situation, the lack of trust of freedoms in authorities, in democratic organization. And I think there is the area where OSCE PA is very important. And how to do this work. The project is very important, but we need to go further on. And I would like to say the diversity in OSCE PA with its 57 countries, it's something to build on. Geographically, ethnical, gender, political. And we should really try to have this focus of diversity in all our perspective. I think this is very important. Not only to listen to those who speak today, also about those who would not take the floor. Because that's the way to go forward, in my opinion. And what to do, how to do. I think that's one important issue for today's discussion that I look forward. But I would like to add one perspective that might be a way to act, to think about. Maybe there are other arenas as well. OSCE PA and OSCE are very famous for its work with election observation, monitoring elections. Maybe we could contribute also to develop the parliamentarian work, to scrutinize parliaments between the elections. How do the parliament work? How does it look when it's come to the perspective that I mentioned, but also to others? And to combine this with the election observation. I mention this because we have structures, we have already a perspective what's important. And if we want to build security, if we want to build democracy, we have to take our work a step further. What I also would like to mention here is the involvement in the call for action working group. I think it's so important with a diverse perspective, not only talking about the chair of the delegations, also to talk about how is the delegation composed. Are there other perspectives that's needed to involve? Because if we as parliamentarians should go further on, we need to include more than those who are mainstreamed. What I also would like to say when it comes to the finance of the OSCE PA, the finance is always very important. I know that as parliamentarian, and the governmental side knows as well as ministers. OSCE PA is financed by the parliament. This means that it's also important for us to show what we can do for the national parliament. Because if we could contribute to more democracy, to make parliament more relevant in the 57 member countries, I think we do a lot to serve our people who elect us as parliamentarians. And now I look further on for the next speakers, because this is the way a democracy works. We contribute, all of us. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sederfeld. Next speaker is Kyriakos.
Good afternoon, everybody. And to come back on the question, can we do more? The answer must be yes. And I will try to explain this from the point of view of my committee of Human Rights and Democracy Committee. Since the adoption of the Charter of Paris, actually 30 years ago, and the signing of the Helsinki Final Act 45 years ago, global security has been increasingly undermined. Our interconnected world is being faced with older and also new challenges, which leave no room for complacency. Therefore, the first question should be how best the OSCE can adjust to the rapidly changing geopolitical realities in order to safeguard and consolidate its relevance. Escalating tension and increasingly across the OSCE area, both between and within states, as well as horizontal and transnational security challenges, namely terrorism, cyber attacks, organized crime, trafficking, irregular migration, and so forth, require urgent, collective, and effective responses. Renewing our commitment to multilateralism is therefore crucial. Respect for international law, human rights, and the rule of law must be the cornerstone of a solid multipolar international system underpinned by mutual trust, predictability, and transparency in the best interest of our citizens. The OSCE's comprehensive and indivisible approach to security must be upheld and further enhanced. The OSCE must be empowered to ensure participating states' compliance with its principles and commitments through further strengthening its pertinent mechanisms, but first and foremost by fostering dialogue and mutual trust to achieve consensus, the lack of which amputates this organization. Should trust not be achieved, consensus, even in limited areas, will be blocked. Cooperative security must also gain fresh impetus through promoting more flexible cooperation frameworks between competent organizations based on the added value each organization can bring and the avoidance of duplication. Double standards, as I spoke yesterday by the Bureau, undermine the credibility of the OSCE and the international community as a whole. This is particularly relevant in the field of the human dimension. A possible reform could be the streamlining of annual human rights reports for each participating state so that progress in the implementation of OSCE commitments can be regularly evaluated. Our role as parliamentarians and members of this assembly can and must be crucial in efforts to make the OSCE more proactive and more responsive to current and future challenges. In the same vein, the OSCE could significantly facilitate the implementation review of OSCE commitments, also in the context of its election observation missions. At the same time, further tools need to be developed also by the OSCE, first and foremost for the purpose of establishing itself as an integral part of the OSCE and a full-fledged parliamentary organization. Obviously, this matter is related to our broader efforts to achieve consensus across the OSCE area, but also to greater transparency and inclusiveness regarding decision-making within the OSCE. We trust that reforms underway will bring about necessary improvements, which will further increase the political clout of the OSCE. This is highly relevant in the context of a parliamentary diplomacy and this assembly's potential for effective mediation. Finally, it is of great importance to increase visibility of the significant work carried out by the OSCE and the OSCE-PA through targeted actions, both at the national and international levels, further enhancing cooperation with civil society organizations can make an important contribution in this respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Irene Karalambides. Can I remind everybody, please, to stick to the 3 minutes? Otherwise, as you see, there is a long list and not everybody will manage to speak. Thank you. Madam Karalambides, we cannot hear you. We still can't hear you. I will have to move to the next speaker. We'll try again later with you, Mrs. Karalambides. Miroslav Lajčák, former chairman in office. Miro, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Very good. So let me start by welcoming this initiative, Lamberto, and also the non-paper that you produced and we all supported. It's, I think this is the right approach to bring new life to the organization. OSCE is a unique organization, very unique platform. Apart from the UN, is the only one that brings EU, Russia, United States, and a number of other countries together. But unfortunately, this potential is not used. And for many years, OSCE has been seeking its new raison d'etre, but Ukraine proved that there is no need to do so because the raison d'etre is there. But what is not there is a political commitment and will to use the potential of this organization. So I had the honor to serve as the OSCE chairman in office in 2019. A year earlier, I was the president of the UN General Assembly, and the year before, I was the president of the European Union. So let me share with you my personal observations from the inside of these privileged positions. And the biggest problem for the OSCE, as I see it, is the lack of political attention. Unfortunately, it's not on the radar screen of ministers and political level, although it really requires one ministerial meeting a year. But this is not happening, and therefore, as a consequence, the organization is run by the ambassadors, permanent representatives. And what I have witnessed and was very sorry to do so is that politics is made of rules and procedures, and therefore there is no room for politics, for political discussions. Rules are made and procedures are turned into politics. Furthermore, the organization has become hostage of agreed language and agreed procedures. I've seen a fear of new ideas. I've seen fear of new suggestions. Just repeat what was done a year before, 2 years before, as if the agreed language was always agreed language. It has to be agreed one day as a new language. And then, of course, instead of seeking a compromise that moves us all forward, we are coming to the meeting to fight for our national interests by refusing any other ideas. But we would never have the Helsinki Final Act if our predecessors had the same approach. What are my suggestions? First, of course, get the political level, and here the parliamentarians can do a lot to demand that the ministers pay attention and go to ministerial meetings. Second, promote the field offices. This is what makes OSCE unique. Field offices are doing great job on the ground, but people don't know about it. And this is also really makes the difference between OSCE and other organizations. Third, organize events other from formal structures, such as this, thematic discussions with the participation of those who are willing to participate, and then present the suggestion to formal structures and bodies. This will not be ignored or cannot be ignored. And we have adopted Bratislava Appeal at the Ministerial Council in Bratislava, which is not a formal document, but it is a relevant document. And focus on what makes this organization unique and specific. This is also very important. Don't compete with the others. Let us not forget that the perfect is the worst enemy of good, and perfect for 57 is different from perfect for me. And finally, do something about the zero nominal growth policy, because this is suffocating the organization. And which brings me back to the beginning, which is need for political attention, political commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miro. Very useful, and thank you for your very concrete suggestions as well. Shall we try again, Mrs. Karambalides, if she solved the problems? Can you hear me? Can you speak? No, it doesn't seem to work. Then we go to the next one, Mr. Guliyev, another Vice President of the Parliamentary Assembly. Please, Mr. Guliyev.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador. First of all, let me to greet all of you from Baku. It is really nice to see so many familiar faces, old and new friends. The topic that we are discussing is, of course, very important. This is why I'd like to briefly share my views on the dialogue and how can it be improved. This is the dialogue which is really important and needed for the Assembly, not only for Assembly, for all the OSCE families, is very crucial, of course. First of all, I do believe that we should effectively use the available mechanisms and tools of the OSCE institutions for fruitful discussions and finding a common approach for many issues throughout the dialogue. The Parliamentary Assembly employs such instruments like the ad hoc committees, of course, besides the statutory meetings, which about counterterrorism, migration, as well as we have created, as you know, the informal secret support group, which play effective role for discussions of important issues. It is important also to invite the decision maker and as well as the higher level officials for the discussions that are the Parliamentary Assembly is planning. Dear friends, talking about the effective way of the dialogue and having the let's say discussions among the participating states, I would like to suggest to consider the possibility of establishing the platforms, separate platforms based on different regions. As you know that each region has its own problem, and it is really necessary to be address all this problem based on the regional realities. Just for example, I'd like to briefly inform you that after having liberated its territories from occupation, Azerbaijan has initiated a very unique format of regional dialogue and cooperation, bringing 6 regional countries together, namely Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Russian Federation, Turkey, and Iran. It is a very promising initiative that will promote regional peace and security, and I do hope that it will also much contribute to cooperation and reopening communications and help translation in Azerbaijan. Dear Ambassador, if you don't to touch upon each of the Westminster Council, it is of high importance to raise the effects of the OECD Council meetings, which are, unfortunately, according to my understanding, is mainly of declarative character and with no concrete outcome in many cases due to the lack of consensus. The previous speaker, Mr. Lashish, also touched upon these issues about consensus and about the role of the Ministerial Council. This is why I do hope that it would be a great idea if we could have some sort of preliminary or preparatory meetings at the level of the deputy ministers before the Ministerial Council to discuss and, if possible, to avoid the potential disagreements and controversial situations prior to the meetings. Maybe then it could raise the chance of getting consensus and, of course, having some agreed language or agreed document. And also, dear friends, I think it is also important to think about the holding summit of the heads of state that really could take a leading role, also endorse the security architecture and other related issues that have a common interest for all the member countries. Finally, dear friends, I'd like to suggest on this regarding this regard that it will be maybe a good idea also to set up a joint working group consisting of the members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly as well as the OSCE institutions in order to elaborate all the challenging issues and the possible way of their solutions in order to submit for the discussions of the Ministerial Council as well as head of the states. Taking this opportunity, I do believe that Mr. Ambassador Zannier, you are enough experienced politician as well as diplomat. You could easily coordinate this activity, this working group, and of course to get feedback from the other relative institutions in order to have a common and a single voice of the OSCE. Thank you very much, dear friends.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guliyev, taking note of
Hello.
Sorry, I didn't manage to unmute myself. Thank you, Mr. Guliyev, for your suggestions. We have taken note. And now next is the former Secretary General Thomas Greminger. Yeah, Thomas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lamberto. Dear colleagues, I will very much echo what Miroslav Lajčák just said. So first of all, congratulations for this excellent initiative to follow up on the PA call for action. I do believe that the PA is very well placed to prepare the ground for a meaningful Helsinki +50 process. Yes, it's true, we have seemingly plenty of time for to prepare for Helsinki 2025, but then again, we all know that we live in a terribly challenging time, and we will have to design such a process in a very careful way, perhaps also sequence it if we want to make sure that it takes off. The process definitely will have to be supported by strong political guidance and support. And I think if we look at what has been happening, what has been tried since Corfu, I think it is clear that a decisive feature of any successful reform drive needs to be political guidance, political interest. Two examples how important this is: the leadership crisis of last summer that has been alluded to was triggered clearly by political games by diplomats in Vienna. There was hardly any interest. Nobody took note in the capitals. Capitals only realized that we had a leadership vacuum after the facts. There were hardly any attempts, hardly any ministerial, not to speak of presidential interventions to prevent that leadership crisis. The budget has been alluded to. The regular OEC budget is now for 9 consecutive years on zero nominal growth, and it is normally approved 3 to 6 months late. And I think this is just not a normal, and this is very much different when we talk about the budget of the special monitoring mission to Ukraine that is being cared for in the capitals. Here, we manage to always approve these budgets in time, and even with significant increases, if well argued. And I think the difference is the regular budget does not have any attention of the capitals, any political follow-up, while the SMM budget does have this. Now, 2 concrete suggestions. One, I think we need to organize the political dialogue differently in the OSCE. We need to engage governments, ministers much more regularly, much more systematically. Once a year at the formal MC is just not enough. I know there have been attempts by previous chairs. Miroslav very successfully organized an informal ministerial council in the High Takas that led to excellent discussions, also of strategic nature. I think that's the way to go. For instance, last year, the OSCE did a lot of conceptual work on the nexus between security and COVID-19. But there was never, ever a political discussion on the level of ministers on this debate, on this important nexus between, this important interface between security and COVID. We also need, again, groups of countries that wouldn't simply delegate problems to the chair, to the chairmanship, but try to take up issues and launch a political process in the OSCE, as it was back in the CSE times, where we had, for instance, the NNN countries, you know, that really pulled through, that pushed the processes through. So I think it would be important that countries, again, take up initiatives on the political level, and why not initiatives that would focus on the well-functioning of this organization. My second point, I think we should acknowledge what the comparative advantage of this organization currently is, and that is, it is an inclusive platform for dialogue. At the same time, it is clearly a group of very heterogeneous, a group of non-like-minded countries. And I think we should acknowledge that. Instead of fighting over which of the three dimensions is more important than the other, instead of trying to define what core business in the OSCE is, or instead of trying to streamline activities, which is a mission impossible, considering the very different interests of OSCE's constituency, I think we should simply acknowledge that we are non-like-minded, but we have this fantastic feature of having 57 very different states at the same table, and try to identify where interests converge, on which security challenges would we have converging interests. Yeah, and I guess I stop here, and I might, would like to come back on some of the issues that you raised in your excellent non-paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I hear that Mr. Karalambides now is on the phone, so let's try again in this other way. Please, Ms. Karalambides.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry for the technical problems. And it's great that you have been organized this very important discussion. I will be brief. Major players are clearly undermining the ability of the OSCE to add value in promoting lasting security and stability in our vast region. The ongoing stalemate with regard to granting the OSCE a universally recognized legal personality and capacity, which makes the OSCE a lesser organization, must be overcome. This is yet another case where the much-yearned consensus amongst participating states has been lacking. In fact, consensus provides a safety net for small states upon the principle of participating states making their contributions in conditions of full equality and developing cooperations as equals, enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act. At the same time, abuse of the consensus rule, which leads to paralysis, stresses the urgent need to rebuild trust. We must be creative in order to break this vicious circle. Inclusiveness is the key word. so that no country feels isolated or rejected. The OSCE must regain credibility for upholding its founding principles and norms to which participating states must renew their commitment. Greater efforts must be made to further increase the OSCE's outreach and visibility in the international scene. Therefore, it's essential that the OSCE ensures its geographically balanced and effective presence across the OSCE area through value-adding actions and by avoiding duplication. Parliamentary diplomacy can be instrumental in this respect. And organized crime certainly constitutes a high priority issue. I truly believe there is great potential that must be further exploited both at the level of the OSCE and the OSCE-PA in terms of reviewing legislation and of conducting relevant missions to talk with stakeholders and suggest possible solutions. The recent pandemic was represented a wake-up call in terms of how fragile and interconnected our security is. Environmental pollution, the climate crisis, protection of public health, and the digital revolution are top security global challenges we should urgently focus on. The OSCE-PA should lead the way in this context and promote a more holistic approach in cooperation with the executive structures and our international partners. Summing up, only by addressing the top security threats for the 21st century, we can make the OSCE relevant again. Regarding the OSCE-PA, the primary concern is to be recognized as an integral body of the OSCE and a fully fledged parliamentary organization with an oversight role. We must enhance the political role of OSCE-PA. For that to happen, we need to ensure more transparency as well as strengthen the role of the Standing Committee. I strongly believe that the reforms under study will significantly contribute in this direction. We do not underestimate the adverse circumstances that prevail in the international system, but our governments must find the courage to choose dialogue over confrontation. Abiding by international law is the only possible way ahead. International organizations can be as strong as states wish them to be. I do thank you, and sorry once again for the technical problems I had to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Doris Barnett. But before you speak, Doris, just one point of organizational debate. We'll continue until with the list until a few minutes before 4 o'clock. Then I will give the floor to the President, Lord Bowness, for some concluding remarks for this session. Then I would like to introduce the second speaker, Ambassador Stroal, and then the other speakers will continue after the intervention of Ambassador Stroal. Thank you, Doris. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Lamberto, and hello, dear colleagues. I'm very glad to be here, and I like all your good contributions to this discussion, to this important discussion. But every once in a while, I felt a little bit like in an infinitive loophole, like never-ending loophole about these discussions, because it's not the first time that we are discussing this. And to be a little bit more poetic, I would even say your messages I hear, but faith has not been given. This comes not because you are not meaning it well, but we try so hard since years and years about trust between government, our own government, and the own parliamentarians. Is that given? Can each parliamentarian of our organization go home, talk to the minister and say, we want you to help us doing this and that? And is it taken serious? First, values. Can we have consensus? It's so hard. See, we have the Minsk group about the Armenia and Azerbaijan conflict for 20 years. And it was so hard until Turkey and Russia took over the stick, and they did what they did. So we try so hard, and you're so right that dialogue is should be above a confrontation. We have to do a lot of work. A lot of work is in front of us. We have to see what is our core work, our core assignment, and see that we bring everything we were talking about within this framework of our rules and within the framework of our actually structures. Because otherwise, if we have too many sidelines, we get lost. And do our governments then take us serious when we diffuse in too many things? This is a little bit what I'm afraid of. And you said a lot of very good things, that, for instance, the parliamentarians must be able to come to all our meetings. Is this really true? Can this really happen? Because I heard, in the hallways, you hear whispering that you had a hard time to get here because your head of delegation didn't want you, because you belong to the opposition, to come here. Things like that. So here it starts. If we don't get this straight, if we are not strong enough to get this organization, to get our PA together, how then can we argue against governments, governments that are not ours? Things like that. And all the topics you reached out are correct. We have the three committees, and I'm very proud and very thankful to Roberto and also to Bonabella that we did such a good work in the second committee about about climate and COVID. And we try very hard to work within that. So we have to be very careful about what to wish and what we are actually able to do in the end. Thank you. I didn't hope to be too pessimistic.
Thank you very much, Doris. Next is former President George Tsereteli. So good to see you. Please, George.
Thank you, dear Lamberto. I'd like to greet all of you. I don't know, you hear me well or not? I guess yes. And I'm very happy to see so many friends and dedicated people. The screen use this opportunity also to thank you all, because I received so many good wishes and very warm letters after I left my position, but I'm very happy that the organization in very good hands. And also this gathering today, this very important meeting initiated by Lamberto, by Roberto, by Ambassador Strohal, and a group of people who a few months ago, and I'm very privileged to be among them, to start this dialogue, how to enhance our organization. Somebody said here, I think it was Senator Cardin, that we're believers, or he is a believer. Yes, we are all believers in this organization. That's why we'd like to improve the condition of this organization to be more influential, more visible. And I think also here are people who started this organization. See here Spencer Oliver and many presidents, former presidents who during their terms contributed significantly to this organization with ups and downs. But when we're talking now, we're talking about the entire organization. We're not talking about only Parliamentary Assembly. And Thomas Greminger and others and my colleagues here will agree that during my presidency and before, we always had the aim to strengthen whole OSCE, not only Parliamentary Assembly. And I think that success of this organization will be in the success of all the institutions of this organization. And I'd like to wish all the best to heads of institutions, new ones, my good friends and very experienced people. So when we are talking about future plans, and this meeting is about that, what we have to do is no need to identify new challenges. New challenges are in front of us, we all know. And Thomas said very well, and Miro said very well, and some others, where we have these bottlenecks and where are hardships. And of course, we need more concrete action plan, step by step, until we will celebrate 50th anniversary of this organization, to say at that time what we achieved and what was wrong and what we improved, and how we're more visible and influential in good faith. And I think, of course, there are practical issues. And I fully agree. I will start with several of them, just outline several of them. We need more meetings. We need more meetings. I agree with Thomas that one ministerial meeting is not enough. And it's a good example when with the Parliamentary Assembly, with help of Secretary General at that time and the Permanent Council, we doubled interaction with Permanent Council, because President is speaking to the Permanent Council twice a year. It's improved our cooperation. I think it's influenced also the work. So we need more with the institutions, more with the ministers, and we need high-level meetings to attract that attention. How many times ministers are asking their Vienna ambassadors, which I told, by the way, on last Ministerial Council, and are speaking about the OSCE agenda, if it's not only Ukraine or some other burning issue. No, but it should be consistently, approached by high-level officials. And of course, we need even more. We don't have any speakers meeting of the OSCE, and it was my idea also several times I raised it. Why not speakers of the OSCE gathered once a year or biennial meetings and discuss political issues? And of course, heads of states. And we have to do that before I think the 2025. And then consensus rule, of course, that's hampering all the process. It's very good to safeguard the interests of small states, but it should not be instrument for bullying and blackmailing on every petty issue. We know that. We all know that. We said it many times, but what to do, that's a goal of this group, I think, Lamberto, if you agree, how to change it and how to influence all this process. And of course, then the better use, of course, all the instruments that we have. And when we are talking about involvement of executive branch or more attention from ministers, more, let's say, more scrutiny from the Parliamentary Assembly, let's say, implementation review or whatever, that's all important. But working closely with government, it means to be well equipped and a better equipped. If we want to have more field missions, more effective, or institutions, they need financial support, and we all understand it very well. So I guess this setting and this discussion will help us to identify more concrete ways and steps how to move forward, and not to, let's say, have only theoretical exercises, which we had many times before. And I believe that so many committed people around, so many great personalities with vast experience will make this change. So thank you very much again. Maybe I will intervene again in another part on particular issues, but I guess all the ideas which were put forward by my colleagues will enrich that non-paper which exists at this moment, and for next time we will have more concrete plan to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you for your contribution, and we have taken good note of your suggestion, and thank you for your comments. I would like now to give the floor back to President Lord Bowness for some comments at the end of this first session then bringing the second guest speaker, Ambassador Stroal, after which we will continue with the speakers list. Lord Bowness, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I think the comments which have been made this afternoon from colleagues in the Parliamentary Assembly show what a commitment the members have towards the Assembly and towards the OSCE itself, and willingness to support its work, whether that's within our own work ourselves or within our national parliaments. And I look forward to considering how that is to be taken forward in future meetings of the Bureau and the Standing Committee, because clearly this whole project has to be owned by the Parliamentary Assembly and its membership. I note a call by my predecessor for more meetings. Well, that's something we should have to consider, bear in mind the willingness or otherwise of national parliaments to support their members in undertaking that kind of activity. But at the end of this last session, I would just like to raise the point which actually President Sertelli raised himself, and hope that we might have some comments from our speakers on the question of consent and the consensus rule. The Parliamentary Assembly enjoys much greater freedom than the OSCE itself, because the consensus rule only applies in very limited spheres. So I'd be interested to hear whether it's possible to keep this organization together if a consensus rule didn't exist, and is there scope not for abolition of consensus, but for greater use and more rapid use of the consensus -1, or which has I think already been used once, or consensus -2, which I don't think is even being used at all. And is there scope for greater use of those two decision-making processes? Thank you very much, Ambassador, and I look forward to the second half of the discussion.
Thanks to you, President. And maybe we will have to have one of the future sessions of this group devoted to the consensus rule, to the perceived abuse of consensus in the organization, or managing consensus, we can call it that way. I would like now to briefly interrupt the debate to give the floor to a second guest speaker, Christian Stroal, Ambassador Stroal. I imagine you will all be familiar with him. He's another old friend of the OSCE, and he has acted in many key roles in the organization. He's been a permanent representative of Austria at the time, I think, when Austria was considering for the second time the chairmanship of the organization. He has been director of UDIR, so he has a first-hand experience of the difficulties and the challenges that being head of institution and in particular institution operating in human dimension involves. So we're really interested in hearing your contribution to the discussion, Christian. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Lamberto, and I'm delighted to be with such a great group of cognoscenti and aficionados. When I signed the call for action, what is happening today, this was in my wildest dreams, that this would develop into an overall comprehensive process. And I think that we already had a great discussion and agree this is a great organization, certainly better than is often given credit to, and that there is high importance to the parliamentary dimension. So what I would like to do in my 5 minutes is to look at the other side, as it were, of common purpose, which is common responsibility and common accountability, move this into the human dimension more specifically as requested, and then end with a few questions. And the appeal to come together and to work together is, of course, relevant to work together over disagreements, which has always been at the hallmark of the CSC and the OSCE process. If there weren't
disagreements, we wouldn't need the organization. But this working together over disagreements, of course, means common and shared responsibilities and common and shared accountability. Responsibility for, as we have already discussed, the visibility of the organization, its utility, its effectiveness, especially when we look at this whole of OSCE approach, which has been mentioned by the President Terezzi, but also is in the excellent first presentation of the new Secretary General. A whole of OSCE approach means that we start, of course, with the commitments. We start with making full use of the organization's potential, and we move on to contribute actively in all three areas of activities of this organization. In the forum, interact not only internally, but also externally in the regard of norms, which is, of course, to respect our detailed shared commitments and the shared responsibility for their implementation. And I will come back to that. And third, of course, the operational side of this organization, to make full use of the institutions with their broad mandate, of the field missions, of other missions, of the whole setup of the executive structures, and how this can be linked maybe more systematically with the activities of the Parliamentary Assembly would be one of my first questions. Accountability looks at the whole responsibility cycle, as it were, which is where it becomes interesting in bringing the national dimension together with the multilateral dimension of this organization. So this would include a regular review, identification of implementation deficits and of ways to overcome them, strengthening mechanisms for reviewing and for accountability, and lastly, and maybe most importantly, ensuring a systematic follow-up, also an issue which has been mentioned by several speakers. And in all of this, the human dimension is emblematic. It's emblematic because it's a difficult subject. It's a subject where wherever you discuss it, it's about the behavior of governments vis-à-vis their own citizens. And it is therefore somewhat atypical of classical diplomacy. You don't negotiate over compromises over human rights. So again, an importance for parliamentary input, as it has been the case in the history of the organization. The human dimension is and has always been a seismograph for crises. But at the same time, today it is in a crisis by itself. There is a global human rights fatigue, which has been highlighted by the pandemic, which in turn, but also highlights more human rights issues. There is arguably a human rights leadership fatigue. And there is a fatigue of engagement, which means that we see civil society and the reality check they bring to the table as often as inconvenient or politicized, which then turns into a kind of shoot the messenger approach. So in this picture, what is the possible role for the Parliamentary Assembly and for parliamentarians to move forward? And there I would want to raise a few questions. First of all, the complementarity between the PA and the diplomatic machinery in Vienna. Can this be brought together? We of course have an excellent setup today with a lot of mutual and personal interlinkages between the two sides. Question: how can more reality checks, witness hearings, accountability measures come forward from the Parliamentary Assembly to Vienna? My third question on again, something which has been discussed already, how to ensure awareness and follow-up at the national level in a much more systematic manner. And finally, in the human dimension a few questions. Peer review capacities, peer review processes, voluntary reporting. What would be the role for the PA? What would be the role for national parliaments? Human dimension meetings, human dimension committee, how can they be brought into the 21st century and made more effective? How to bring in the civil society not only into meetings and stop fighting over what are good NGOs and what are bad NGOs, but rather how to engage with them in the preparation and how to engage with them in the follow-up as well. What is the particular role of your own third committee? Can you do more regular human rights hearings, maybe over Zoom? Can you think about emergency measures? Can you hook up more specifically with the Human Dimension Committee in Vienna? So I think that is also a question. And finally, on election observation. I mean, I think I have to say that it is great to see the super cooperation between the PA and the ODIHR in particular. So thank you, Roberto, for all you have been doing in this regard. Question, how can this be used to strengthen the follow-up, to strengthen the follow-up onto the recommendations coming from final reports together and in a more systematic manner, and use the national delegations also in this regard. My last question is bringing me to Ben Cardin's first point, really, and the example of the Congress Helsinki Commission. Is there a place or is there a utility in dedicated non-partisan Helsinki commissions, OSCE commissions in national parliaments? Why is it not everywhere that there is a specific focus in national parliaments onto the organization, which after all has a parliamentary assembly? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you for a very concrete approach and for being also open in your considerations. There are already reactions, as I can see. But we continue now with the speakers list. Dame Audrey Glover, who is another former director of the ODIHR. So, Dame Audrey Glover, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Good, fine. Well, I just want to say what a great pleasure it is to be able to participate in this meeting. And I just have a few words that I would like to say. Firstly, I share with Lord Bowness and the chairperson's concern about the erosion of democracy. But I think that the OSCE PA is ideally placed to assist in preventing it in relation to the non-implementation of election commitments. The Parliamentary Assembly already participate, as we know very well, in election missions, but they could work with members of the OSCE PA to help them with the implementation of the recommendations that appear in the final reports of elections. They could do this by discussing issues and helping states to overcome their problems. And they could also do this because they are parliamentarians and used to being involved with drafting legislation. And whatever can be done in relation to improving the human dimension in general, and to fight against and preserve to fight against the problems that democracy is at the moment encountering. And this, of course, is something which we all need to work on. In just a quick word in relation to improving human dimension meetings. The focus should be again on their original purpose, which was taking stock of the implementation of commitments. At the moment, states comment on the lack of other states' progress rather than their own achievements or lack of them. But I think that the Human Dimension Committee works much better because of the voluntary reporting of the countries focusing on their own progress rather than criticizing others. Christian has referred to the participation of civil society, and I think that it would be an extremely good idea if more attention could be paid to that. Because the problem at the moment with human dimension meetings is that there are numerous gongos who attend and who in effect take over the agenda. And it would be important to have genuine NGOs attending, and it would be extremely good if it were possible to achieve this. And of course, the OSCE does need effective mechanisms to ensure in practical ways the accountability and responsibility which Christian was referring to. And the lack of accountability for violations of commitments must change if democracy is to be preserved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Important themes you are raising and issues that will certainly have to be discussed in more detail, including the participation of civil society and the accountability on implementation of commitments. So we take note of these things, and they will be on the agenda of follow-on meetings of this group. So next speaker on my list is Audronios Azouboulis, former chairman of office. Good to see you, Audronios. And Audronios is the person who facilitated my appointment as Secretary General back in 2011. So great to see you again. Please, Audronios.
Hello to everybody. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for an opportunity to share some remarks. Most of them are sadly known for years to those who are connected to this respectful organization. Let's imagine the strength and effectiveness of the OSCE if the main threats to the security of the OSCE region disappeared, specifically the frozen conflicts, the war in the temporarily occupied eastern Ukraine, and the illegal annexation of Crimea, the occupied Transnistria, Georgia regions of Abkhazia and Tkhinvali. I guess you all see the destructive role of one state in all of these conflicts. I would even say this serves as an instrument to that particular country's foreign policy, making the security architecture in the entire OSCE area unsustainable. Of course, it's Russia, which have traditionally demonstrated its negative influence in the negotiation on decisions such as OSCE efforts for peace in Ukraine, the verification of Ukrainian border, on United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 implementation, on the declaration of the 13th anniversary of the Vienna document for the presidency of the organization in 2024, the appointment of heads of institutions, and the like. It seems that without solving the strategic problem of Russia's counterproductive influence in the organization, we couldn't achieve a genuine role of the OSCE to promote the European security order, foster our common principle, commitments, and dialogue in our region. How to do it? It's a main question not just for OSCE, but for the whole democratic world, which has only one method: day by day, in words and in actions, to confirm our position on democracy and human rights. And I would say we should try to avoid deadly compromises which push us and our organization to the gray zones, what we see now in current European policy. As a tactical measures to revitalize our organization, I believe the added value of OSCE could also be strong and sufficiently financed institutions, especially the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, as well as ensuring smooth implementation of its core functions and activities like the work of a specific special monitoring mission to Ukraine. And the last remark regarding political crisis in Belarus. Incumbent and former chairpersons in office shouldn't be tricked by Belarusian regime letting to involve our organization in so-called negotiations. It's dead end. What we, international community and people of Belarus need is a new and fair elections. Elections not later than this year, in springtime. All regimes talks about its preparations for dialogue with opposition, it's a trap. We saw it in previous time. And our goal, not to delay and not to let the regime to use this time to disperse and fragment opposition. That's our remarks. Dear Lamberto, dear friends, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Odronios. Let's move on. Ilka Kanerva. Ilka, please, you have the floor. Ilka, we cannot hear you. Try again. Ilka, one last chance, otherwise I'll move on with the list.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, now we hear you. Go ahead.
Very good, very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, yes, first of all, I want to congratulate Lamberto, Mr. Chanier, because it looks that you are in the very, very good speed again, and it's very good to welcome you into the family again. And also, I want to say that you have had excellent speeches here. I want to mention especially Miros Lajcek and our previous president, Ceratelli, very, very good and essential visions on our work. Now I want to be a little bit rebel in this debate by starting with a notice that we had just a few years ago the process in the PA side called by Helsinki +40. We remember those days concerning this discussion. It was a process with our colleagues and experts, with the academic world, and so, not only in Moscow or in Washington, D.C., but also in other main capitals in our region. So it would make sense, I think, to collect those thoughts and experiences, not to start from the point of zero. And that's why I think that it would be very good to also collect those ideas. We have to remember that our security organization, with a comprehensive idea of security, is our main target. And of course, we have to underline the fact that we have very, very highly appreciated, value-based organization with 3 clear different baskets to be involved, to be included. So it's good to notice that our contribution to the international development, or why not to say that constant conflicts, frozen conflicts, are not in our methods, they are not going to implement different boycotts or sanctions in various ways, but the dialogue, not the power policy actions, not the power policy activities, but the diplomacy, parliamentary diplomacy, and of course on the intergovernmental level, of course, that's clear. As I mentioned, the values are our strength. Values are our asset, but to advance our profile, our influence, effectiveness, whatever, I suppose we should get deeper into the actual challenges of the security world in our region. Not only to write manifests or declarations, but to concentrate, to focus more and more to the real business, also increasing with our intergovernmental actors so that the real and concrete results could be achieved together on the international, intergovernmental and parliamentary level together. What is needed to do is also to consider again if our decision-making system is the best possible to do, to implement, but also at the same time remember that it's also very important that everyone, every member country is involved, so that every country is on board in various ways. So that we should be very concrete, we should focus in a concrete way to the actual problems, not only alone on the parliamentary side or intergovernmental side, but all together. So that these are some main thoughts added to the ideas of some other speakers earlier. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ilkka. It was a pleasure hearing your voice, and we look forward also to working on Helsinki plus 50. Of course, that's the ultimate deadline for this kind of process, but I hope there will be a number of intermediate steps where we can address many of the issues that you have raised, and others have raised, of course. Now, next is Heidi Freid. Please, you have the floor.
Happy New Year to everyone. It's so great to see you all. It really is a pleasure to see you. I think I would like to start off by addressing the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is this pandemic called COVID-19. What it has done is it has shown us that, in fact, our institutions, democracy, and all of the security that we stand for and try to achieve at the OSCE and at the OSCE level is extremely fragile. And we need to start to talk about how we strengthen those institutions. What do we do to stop them from being fragile? How do we learn lessons from what we're seeing? Of course, I'm going to mention the fact that democracy is at stake here. To the south of me, I see and saw a nation in peril for democracy. Around our region, we see democracy at stake. We've talked about that. But one of the things to remember about democracy is that one of the pillars of democracy is not only free and fair elections and freedom of the media, it also is a strong civil society. And I want to pick up the thread where everyone talked about civil society. We need at national levels and at the international level to engage civil society, to be able to bring them on our side, to make them part of our solution. We need to do that. We need to use the strength of democracy, that we have to do that. I think it's also important to note that women, we've seen through the whole of the COVID pandemic, women have been the worst hit. Women have had to leave their jobs and stay at home to look after their families, especially when schools are closed and they've got to stay at home and try to do that. That has created a huge problem for women, in whom in many of our regions have actually, our nation states, a fragile attachment to the employment force anyway. So we need to talk about how we deal with that. But what I want to say is that it's really important to deal with some of the problems that we face. If we are actually going to make changes, we need to be bold. We need to realize that because our systems and our institutions did not stand up to this pandemic and its inherent fragility was shown, that we have to talk about really strengthening them in a true way. And one of the ways that we're going to have to look at that is not only to engage the whole human dimension, and that, as I'm going to say, includes gender, but it includes looking at all of the fragile people, the human dimension, the refugees, the people who had no place to live, who are now living in a no man's land in all of these tent cities around Europe and in many parts of the world. And I think we need to recognize that until all of us are strong, none of us will be strong. And so we need to really pay attention to dealing with some of those issues. But at the heart of it is something that everyone has talked. It's about rules and procedures. Consensus isn't working. Every time the OSCE tries to make a change, every time we move forward with some innovative ideas, it is blocked by certain nations. We have not moved forward in any strong way that we could on all of the issues we're dealing with. You know, pandemics are going to keep coming. They're not the first. This is not going to be the last. How do we build resilience in our infrastructure? How do we build resilience in the human dimension? How do we build our democracy to be resilient? Because we have seen what can happen. And I think the rules and procedures need to be, we need to push for change here. You know, I know that Peter Rodas talked a little bit about looking at whether we can deal with the -2 rule in terms of consensus. How do we do that? Let's talk about that. Let's move that forward. I think that's really important. We talked about national parliaments. We talk about how do we change. We need to use social media more. Most people in Canada do not know of the existence of the OSCE or of the OSCE-PA. Most civil society don't. How are we getting out there in our national parliaments and reaching out to our own populations and saying, hey, here we are. This is what we are struggling for. This is what we're fighting for. We need you to know that we're alive and well and we're trying to make these changes. We need you to support us and come in with us to make those changes. That's the first one. I think we also need to deal with the fact that we or the Secretariat, the executive, need to reach out directly to national parliaments, need to be able to speak to national parliaments in a real way and say, this is who we are and this is what we do. Because again, most national parliaments don't even know of the existence of the PA because we don't advertise ourselves well enough. We don't speak to the issues that we're doing. I have been trying to do this through social media in Canada. I think people are sick and tired of hearing about the OSCE and the OSCE-PA in a lot of my social media because I'm trying to put us on the map. We've got to be on the map because I think if we get on the map, people, real populations out there will see us as having real relevance to their lives. And so these are some of the things I wanted to talk about change. I mean, Margareta Cederfeld talked about diversity. We need to talk about that. Inherent in the OSCE is diversity. We are not all like-minded. We're completely diverse in the ways that our cultures function, in the ways that we see human rights, in the ways that we deal with democracy. Many are struggling to take democracy on and to become democratic nation states, and they can't because they see how fragile democracy is, and they watch what is happening around the world. And I know that Europe, you're all very close and you talk to each other, and most of you are about 2 hours away from each other. But you know, the United States and Canada are very far away, yet we are important parts of the OSCE. And there is very little attention paid to what is going on in Canada, except in the US when what we saw happened in January happened and everyone got very upset and worried. But I do think we need to start meeting more. People talked about that. And we've seen how we did this during COVID-19. We've seen how we've used Zoom and WebEx and all of the ways we can meet. We need to touch base a lot more. We need to talk to each other a lot more. We need to become far more activist than we have been, both nationally and internationally. And so that's basically what I wanted to say. It's just cobbling together something in a short space of time. But I do think that we have to change some of our rules and procedures. We have to work to do it, and we have to engage civil society to help us to strengthen democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi, for your statement. Let me react to a couple of points you made. On the last one, you mentioned Zoom, and Zoom will be there even in the post-COVID phase. So we can also think how we can use this technology to reach out to parliaments better from the perspective of the leadership of the organization and the parliamentary delegation. So we can brainstorm in one of the maybe future meetings of this group on how best to do that to promote a better knowledge of the OSCE, and through that a better use of the OSCE by governmental authorities of the countries and also by parliaments, of course. The other point I wanted to make, but maybe in the conclusion we'll touch this more systematically. There are certain clusters of issues that keep coming back, and maybe we can start thinking about possible papers, option papers. For instance, we could have a debate on consensus and consider various ways in which consensus could be managed, limiting it to more political decisions and then giving responsibilities at different level, or having different kind of decision-making processes for procedural decisions, for instance, or the consensus -1, 2, etc. So all these options can be listed. One can look at the pros and the cons, and then having a debate, and then discussing how to go ahead. So these are the things that the stepping stones of this process in the next phases. But I don't want to preempt the other speakers who haven't really intervened yet. Adrian Severin is next. Please, former president.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be together and to deal with these topics, which I have very much at my heart. Well, I have prepared and passed to the Secretariat a short paper in trying to answer the non-paper which we have received. I hope that sometimes this paper might be useful, but for this time I'm going just to pick up few ideas and to offer them as an input for this afternoon debate. So if I would be asked to draft an agenda of priorities from my point of view, which the OSCE, in order to be back on the tracks, to be again visible and to have more authority, so the first priorities would be, number one, the revision of the decision-making procedure. Second, the revision of the follow-up procedures. Third, the re-establishment of trust among members. We need a robust mechanism of trust building procedures. Fourth, the focusing on crisis prevention and crisis resolution. And I believe it is urgent to produce some successful stories. And from that point of view, indeed, as Mr. Lajčák put it, the field missions are of a crucial importance. Number five, the coordination and cooperation with other international entities active in the same or similar fields. And six, a new approach of the human rights issue. Within the package of challenges, I would pick up only two for this moment. The first one, presently, OSCE is undermined by the lack of confidence between members, following a phenomenon which have replaced the Cold War with a Cold Peace. For instance, the increasing Euro-Atlantic military presence along the border of the former Soviet Union is splitting again Europe, thus affecting the mutual trust within the OSCE. I don't want to elaborate on if it's right or wrong to have it. It's avoidable or unavoidable, but this is the fact. And I believe that we have to acknowledge the fact and to acknowledge that the lack of trust is a threat against stability and our collective security. And this is a source of instability. And I think that the key words for the OSCE are not structural confrontation, but structural cooperation and structural coexistence. The second challenge I think we have to address, as I say, I don't want to criticize anything, or I don't want to indicate a way ahead, but simply for the time being just to notice that this is an issue, this is a challenge. I think is how to articulate the OSCE concept of security and cooperation with the concepts developed by some other major global players. And I have in mind first and foremost the most important emerging global actor, which is China, And also I have in mind some other regional organizations, some of them active in Asia and or Pacific, Indo-Pacific area, while within this organization, some of our members are also members. So I think that we have to bear in mind that security and cooperation cannot be, seen or regarded only as a matter for the Northern Hemisphere or for this enlarged Europe, but it is a broader issue and we have to have a broader view on it. How to manage the consensus rule? I fully agree with those who mentioned that we have to change it. It is a burden, it is an obstacle which would not allow the organization to proceed in due time and in a consistent way in coping with the various challenges, opportunities, and dangers. I'm not going to elaborate because the time is short on that, but I think that we have to conceive, maybe with the help of experts, and having a separate meeting on that specific issue, a variety of systems of voting. Consensus -1, sometimes voting with a qualified majority. In exchange, one should conceive a procedure applicable for moving back to consensus rule on case-to-case basis by decision adopted with an absolute majority, for instance, if those more flexible voting systems are misused in bad faith by some. So we have to move ahead in the direction of more flexibility, but also to have in mind some guarantees against the misuse of this more flexibility. In order to facilitate the overcoming of blockages in the decision making, maybe one could adopt a procedure through which certain topics seen as more controversial are referred to the Parliamentary Assembly for an opinion before being tackled at the governmental level, or when the consensus cannot be achieved at that level. So bearing in mind that the procedures are faster in the Parliamentary Assembly, maybe an opinion on controversial issues where it's more difficult to achieve the consensus at the governmental level could be useful. Likewise, one could recognize to the Parliamentary Assembly the right to put on the agenda of the Permanent Council, of course, within limitations in number and nature, certain topics for debate and maybe for decision. How could we improve the dialogue? On the one, I would think that maybe the Permanent Council and the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly might establish a joint group of wise people who should start a process of reflection on the necessity and feasibility to convene a new conference on security and cooperation in Europe, meant to update the Helsinki Final Act in accordance with the developments which took place after the end of the Cold War and of the bipolar world order. How to improve the implementation review? Maybe one should consider the possibility to create a team of special rapporteurs on thematic, geographic, and specific case basis, formed by neutral personalities with a public reputation, acting pro bono, and mandated to follow up the implementation of the OSCE decisions at the national level by the member states. And my final point is about the approach on human rights. The approach to the human rights issue should be changed in such a way as to avoid the temptations to transform the promotion of those rights into a means for moving ahead geopolitical agendas, while admitting that there are several sets or several approaches or several understanding on the human rights, and we cannot defend anymore the idea that we have just one single global value of human rights. When I was younger, I was more radical about that and more strict about that. When we are young, we know very well the rules. When we get older, we understand the exceptions. I think for a more mature OSCE, it's the time to understand better the exceptions. One should accept that each country may adopt a list of rights or a set of rights which is consistent with its own historic and cultural tradition, while the role of the OSCE is not to judge, punish, or shame some of its members, eventually pushing for regime change, but to encourage and support the uniformization of the concepts on human rights, as well as a convergence of the various national approaches in the field. Let's work for the convergence rather than try going on with the judgment of one or the others. I end here. I simply tried to bring up ideas without claiming that there might be conclusions or they are perfect. But I think I believe that it's not only political will which is needed, but also professional imagination. And therefore, we must bring into the process both political players and technocrats who could offer appropriate solutions, which must be adequate, feasible, and sustainable. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the many proposals that you put forward. The only issue is the time. We have little time and still many speakers, so please everybody be brief, otherwise someone will not be able to intervene. I have Carrie Harrison next, please.
Thank you very much. I just want to have some points to the topics that have been raised. I would like to underline the statement of Lord Bonus, who said that the process has to be owned by the PA. And I think that is very important. We have to anchor both the decisions and the process. And I would also like to underline what Ambassador Strobel was, his points about following up in the national level on a systematic manner. We have been, many of us have been speaking that there are not enough action at home from us parliamentarians. But I would just like to underline what I said in my first statement, that we have to need more about it, and we have to encourage the members of the PA on a good manner to bring back the issues to their own parliaments. I will also point one of the issues about the OSCE's reputation and regarding the press releases. I think we can also collaborate to make the press releases more interesting for our own media, so that the secretariats could collaborate on that one, so that the parliamentarians also could play a part in it. I totally agree about the several meetings with the broader topics and the proposals about bringing PA and the ministerial level together on these meetings. I think that's good. I think also it's important that we have good examples to discuss. So we have concrete experiences on how things has been solved, so that that can be brought up for discussion. I would also like to address Audrey Glover, who said that PA members could be used more strongly. And I support it. And I support that the elected members of the PA could play more important role and be more active in the solutions that we have been discussed today. And at my last point is to just underline also what Hedy Frey was saying. Both the COVID and other conflicts are women's issue and gender's issue. So we have to have the focus on the diversity and also on the gender matter. And I would lastly say that I'm so engaged and I'm so empowered by this meeting, because here we have a lot of people who want to be engaged, who want to change, and want to find a way out of it. And I think that is all the best we can have to really make changes in the OSCE family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your initial point on the ownership by parliamentarian is fundamental. I think this is a process run by the Parliamentary Assembly and by the parliamentarians, and everybody else is helping that. Next speaker, Ulvia Agayeva, please.
I think it was me, but...
oh, yes, sorry, John Senatori.
No. First Agayeva, and then I will take floor.
Okay, then...
So,
Mr. Gaia, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks to George.
Thank you, Mr. Tsereteli. Dear colleagues, at the outset, I would also like to welcome the participants of the roundtable and thank the OCPA International Secretariat for organizing this roundtable on such an important topic. Strengthening the effectiveness of the OCE as well as establish a comprehensive approach to security, implementation of the key commitments by participating states and cooperation among states is quite important in addressing the contemporary challenges affecting all member states. Unfortunately, from time to time, organizations lack the ability, political will, and the institutional capacity to ensure compliance by all participating states with these principles and commitments. But I know we are short of time. I'll be brief. I'd like to mention that the previous year has been very challenging period caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as ongoing conflicts and crises in those areas. I believe that the need for solidarity, unity, and international cooperation is more vital now than ever before. Today, it's ever more important to continue to defend the rules-based international order, promote and protect human rights, and work to achieve sustainable development. Azerbaijan, in its turn, also remains committed to working with OCE in support of efforts to ensure a democratic, strong, stable, and prosperous future. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
So, may I, Ambassador?
If I manage to unmute myself, yes.
Yeah.
So, with apologies.
Okay, so I know that time is precious, so I'll be very brief. And I spoke already, but just to clarify something. First, to say that when I spoke in previous remarks about meetings, of course, I didn't mean that we have to increase number of statutory meetings in the PA, but meetings and interaction with the executive branch, with the ministers, with the government members, and with the institutions. Of course, we need more, and I strongly believe in that. Otherwise, we couldn't achieve results. Then about accountability, many of my colleagues mentioned accountability is one of the main issues. And we know that, unfortunately, even for the grave violation of Helsinki principles, there was no accountability for particular countries, and or the mostly particular country is Russia. Maybe we can also consider for future in our discussions what could be additional, let's say, responsibility for the violation, rather than, for instance, only condemnation or damage of reputation. So that's maybe also that could be part of our discussions. Then on civil society, I fully agree that we have to enhance the direction in the whole OSCE, and that's why, just to remind to my colleagues, that we established recently, just a year ago, the position of special rapporteur on civil society. My dear colleague Pia Kauma is leading this direction. I think we have to better use that. And of course, better use all the special rapporteurs that we have, regional ones that are very, I would say, experienced people, and that also could help to increase accountability and responsibilities of delegations of certain countries, in particular delegations in particular countries. And the last point, there was the alert that Blinken, the new Secretary of State, he had a first, I think, his briefing today. And just to say that I see, and maybe we will see more possibilities now in coming years to strengthen multilateralism. And in that sense, of course, I agree with my dear colleague and friend Heidi Fry that we need, of course, more cooperation, more interaction, more dialogue, transatlantic dimension with the United States and Canada. And I think it's also opportunity for the Parliamentary Assembly to achieve its goals, and for the whole OSCE to increase its, let's say, influence in world politics. So that's it. Thank you very much. It was very important and useful discussion.
Non vuole più parlare? No. Okay. So we've come to the end of the speakers list. I would like to give the floor back to the Secretary General, the President, Secretary General Roberto Montella, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Zanieri, dear Lamberto. And thank you all for participating in this event. Thank you very much, Doug Wake and Christian Stroll, to giving us some guidelines. I just want to make, I mean, we would need hours to make comments on all the issues that have been debated, but there are 2-3 issues that really touched my attention. One is the focus on the what I call the end users of the OSCE product, the citizens of these 57 countries. I think all these discussions are much easier if we keep that in mind. Why is there all these big organization with all its articulation? What does it produce? It produces better life for the 57 citizens, for the citizens of the 57 participating states. Here, it was mentioned the process should be incarnated in the Parliamentary Assembly. Parliamentary Assembly is made of parliamentarians who represent these 1 billion citizens. So they know very much, and they have very much at heart the day-to-day conditions of life of these people. So I think if we focus on the end users, all the other issues are much easier. All the other challenges that we have and that have been brought up in this debate are much easier. One of the challenges we've had with President Serratelli, and thank you very much for participating, George, in this debate, when we traveled in the OSCE participating states, we were always told, look, this issue, this frozen conflict or these issues on the budget can be solved if there is political will. And one question that we have never been able to answer is, how do you forge political will? It was mentioned here very many times, we need to have political will. How do you forge political will? Do you forge it with naming and shaming techniques? Do you forge it with sanctions? We in the Parliamentary Assembly believe that you forge political will through dialogue. I heard Severin before mentioned, but you know, this dialogue, we should have some kind of flexibility. I think this is a very key issue, and it was part of one of the debates here. Dialogue should be very firm on the shared values that we have in this organization. So, of course, we have to stretch our hand with those we disagree, but never step back from the shared values and the commitments and the values that we have in this organization. And I think the Parliamentary Assembly is a good tool to also engage in dialogue, provided that we never step back from the shared values that we have agreed on. And Ambassador Zanier, with this first meeting, I think we're really launching a process of the Helsinki plus 50 process. Many have said the Parliamentary Assembly has to have a great role. Yes, indeed, you are a consultant of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Lamberto Zanier. But of course, we want to involve all. And as I said here, we do indeed have parterre de roi. We have all the former CIOs, we have all the former Secretary Generals, the heads of institutions, those indeed who have given ideas, blood, sweat, love to this organization. And I really count on them to guide us through this. Because as many said, this is a real secret. This organization does great stuff. I have been a witness of the great stuff that it does. I've been in field offices, I've been in southern Serbia, I've seen the individuals who have benefited from the work of this organization. And bear in mind, not only the field operations, and the institutions, the Secretary Generals, the Permanent Council, the dialogue of the Parliamentary Assembly. So all the organization in all its articulation delivers to the end users. Miroslav, thank you very much for being back online. I know how much you put focus on the individuals. Also at the UN, you had the people at the center of your agenda at the UN. So this is what we need to really focus on. We focus on the individuals who are the benefiters of what we do, and then our work, our challenges, I think will be much easier. But I don't want to take too much of the time, and I think President Lord Bournes also wants to make some concluding remarks. So thank you all for participating, and we will call on you again in the coming weeks and months on this process. Ambassador Zanier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roberto. And now to President Lord Bournes.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Zanier. I don't want to take up members' time. We're very close to 4 o'clock. I just want to thank you all for participating in this meeting this afternoon. It's been very fruitful. Many ideas have been put forward, both specific ideas as to what we and the OSCE should do and how we should do it. The Bureau Standing Committee of the Parliamentary Assembly will take these points on board and consider precisely how we can do it. what sort of program of meetings are wanted and needed, and who is going to be involved. So there's a lot for us to think about. And I thank everybody for their contribution. As I said earlier, it shows how interested and committed the members of the Parliamentary Assembly are. And lastly, may I just thank Ambassador Zanier for moderating this meeting, which has saved me a great deal of work and effort. I congratulate him on the work that he's done this afternoon on our behalf. And I thank you all and wish you all the best. Many thanks.
Thank you, President. Also from my side, warm thanks to everybody, in particular to Doug Wake and Christian Stroll for their contributions, and to all of you for your engagement. I will work closely with the Bureau, and we'll decide together how we go forward on this thing. We will be ready to produce some food for thought papers on specific issues as we proceed. Thank you very much. Thank you for your contributions, and a nice evening or rest of the day.